My daughter's scream hit me like she was trying to wipe away not just me, but every memory we'd built together. Her words, "You're not my mom," cut through the room like a sharp knife. I didn't shed a tear or raise my voice. Instead, I reached for the envelope I'd held onto for 18 years, its edges worn and yellow, but carrying a truth strong enough to unravel everything. As she stood there, shaking with anger and uncertainty, I handed it to her without a word. Sometimes, staying quiet isn't about being weak, it's the first step towards shattering a hidden lie. If this story touches your heart, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear where you're at. I'm Anna Jackson, born and raised in the small town of Livingston, Montana, where I spent most of my days as a school nurse at Livingston Elementary. By the time I hit 40, I'd come to terms with the idea that I might never have kids of my own. Life threw curveballs, a wedding that never happened, a miscarriage in my early 30s, and years of pouring my heart into other people's children. I adored my students, patching up their skinned knees and soothing their fevers, calming their nerves during fire drills or lonely lunch breaks. I gave every bit of love I had to those kids, even if it was just for a quick 15 minutes. Then, one rainy Wednesday in late April, my world shifted. It all started with a phone call. I was in the nurse's office, sorting through old bandages and nearly empty antiseptic bottles, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it, figuring it was another spam call, but something nudged me to answer. The voice on the line was gentle but firm, calling from the state's Department of Family Services. They told me about a baby, just under 7 months old, named Dakota. Her mother had given up her rights and vanished, and no relatives had come forward to claim her. They needed someone steady, patient, someone ready for a permanent commitment. My name had popped up in their system, Marquez system. Years back, I'd started the process to become a foster parent but stepped back when my mom got sick and needed me. Somehow, my name stayed in their files. I didn't jump in right away, that felt too impulsive. I asked for the weekend to think it over, but the second I hung up, something inside me settled, like a door long closed had cracked open. That night, I stood in my guest room, staring at the dusty treadmill and boxes of Christmas decorations, and I just knew. Over the weekend, I cleaned the place out, moved furniture around, and bought a second-hand crib from a woman in Bozeman who cried as she helped me load it into my car. I didn't pry into her reasons for selling it, some stories are better left untold. On Monday, they brought Dakota to me. She was tiny for her age, with wide gray-blue eyes that took in everything and wild dark curls that looked like they'd never met a brush. She didn't fuss when the caseworker passed her to me. She didn't smile either, just studied my face like she was trying to commit it to memory. Holding her in my arms, I felt something new, not the fleeting care I gave my students or the empty ache I'd carried for years. This was heavy, grounding, like an anchor in a raging storm. She came with a small plastic bag of belongings, a torn onesie, 2 empty bottles, and a worn-out stuffed bunny missing an eye. There were no photos, no letters, no guidebook. I signed papers, noted dates for check-ins, and got ready for what was next, but in that moment, none of it seemed to matter. I sat on the living room floor with Dakota in my lap, the paperwork next to me, and just took a deep breath. She was so still, not scared or shy, just quiet, like she'd already learned the world wouldn't notice her unless she screamed, and maybe not even then. Those first weeks blurred together with bottles, doctor visits, and sleepless nights at 2 a.m., both of us figuring each other out. She didn't like being rocked, she wanted to be held upright, close to my heartbeat. Wind chimes made her happy, but the vacuum cleaner spooked her. When she fell, she didn't cry right away, she'd glance around first, checking if it was okay to feel the hurt. Bit by bit, she became mine, not on paper, not yet, but in every way that counted. That first year, I started a journal, something I'd never done before. I jotted down the little moments, her first reach for me, her first sleepy giggle, the way she gripped my shirt when strangers got too close. I also wrote down my worries. What if I wasn't enough for her? What if she grew up resenting me for not being her birth mom? What if she asked questions I couldn't answer? I promised myself I'd always be honest, never hide the truth, never pretend her past didn't exist. But as the years rolled on, I kept putting it off. She was too young, then too fragile, then too mad at the world. I tucked the truth, her birth certificate, a letter from her mother, court papers, into a manila envelope in my dresser, waiting for the perfect moment. Dakota grew up fast. By age 3, she started calling me Mom. She'd cling to me at daycare drop-offs and scribble "I love you" on drawings in wobbly letters. People often noticed how different we looked, her olive skin next to my pale Irish freckles, her dark eyes against my green ones. But it never bothered us. We were family, chosen, not born, and that bond felt stronger than anything. There were tough times, tantrums, sick days, the sting of lost friends, but so much happiness, too. I taught her to ride a bike on our quiet sidewalk. I watched her shine as Mary in the Christmas pageant, nailing every line. On stormy nights, she'd crawl into my bed and whisper, "You're safe with me, Mommy." I never corrected her or pointed out that I hadn't given birth to her. Love doesn't track debts, it just keeps showing up, even when you're exhausted or scared. I showed up for her every single day. Things started to shift during Dakota's junior year of high school. It wasn't a sudden change, more like paint slowly peeling off a wall you've stopped noticing. One missed dinner became 3. Conversations turned into shrugs. Her eyes stopped meeting mine, looking right through me instead. She was 17, then 18, and her world seemed to grow while mine felt smaller. I told myself it was just teenage rebellion, the natural push for independence. I'd read all the parenting books, knew the lingo, individuation, emotional milestones. I repeated those terms like a prayer while washing dishes alone, her plate sitting untouched in the sink. At first, I blamed the usual culprits: friends, school pressure, hormones. But something deeper was off, something I couldn't quite pin down. It wasn't just defiance. It felt like she disapproved of me, like my presence was a burden she had to lug around, too heavy to drop. She started spending more time at friends' houses. When I asked who she was with, she'd toss out one-word answers, shutting me out. Sometimes, Dakota fibbed about where she'd been, not in bold, in-your-face lies, but in little gaps I'd catch later, like when her story's timeline didn't quite line up or I spotted a concert wristband peeking out from her sleeve. I started asking fewer questions, convincing myself it was better to give her room to breathe than to press her and risk pushing her further away. She began switching up her look, chopping her hair short, dyeing it wild colors, then letting it grow back, always with a hint of rebellion in her choices. Her wardrobe went from vibrant and lively to baggy, dark clothes, like she was wrapping herself in armor. The music she loved, once gentle and full of melody, turned jagged and loud, blasting through her headphones. She started locking her bedroom door, and though I gave her the space she seemed to need, it felt like she was shutting me out of more than just her room. At times, she'd shoot me a look, like I'd committed some unforgivable mistake. Other moments, she wouldn't even glance my way. But every now and then, the girl I raised would peek through the storm clouds, like when she handed me a mug of tea during a blizzard or sent a late-night text promising she'd be home soon. Those glimpses were brief, though, quickly buried under silence, sharp sarcasm, or a growing distance. She became consumed with figuring out where she truly fit in. I'd catch her hushed, intense phone conversations, and once I overheard her whisper, "I don't even know who I am." Those words crashed over me like a cold wave. I stood outside her door, my hand hovering, ready to knock, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I shuffled back downstairs and sat in the dark for nearly an hour, the weight of her words settling over me. We stopped snapping photos together, and the picture frames around the house became like time capsules, us at the beach, at school plays, her arms wrapped around my neck, both of us grinning. I started noticing how she'd slip out of my casual snapshots, stepping aside or turning her face, as if she was already fading from our shared story. One day, I found a manila folder tucked in her backpack, holding a form labeled "Request for Non-Identifying Information" from the state's adoption records office. I sat on my bed, clutching that folder like it was charged with electricity. My hands trembled, but tears didn't come right away. I just stared at the words until they blurred into nonsense. I slipped the folder back exactly where I found it and kept quiet, too scared to bring it up, not because of what she might uncover, but because it meant she was already searching, already doubting. After that, I noticed her watching other families, at the store, in diners, during movies, with a heavy kind of focus. She studied mothers and daughters like she was searching for something she couldn't name. One night, while we watched a movie about a girl reconnecting with her birth parents, I saw her jaw clench and her hands curl into fists in her lap. She slipped out of the room before the film ended. I knew a conversation was coming, but I couldn't predict when or how it would unfold. At school events, people still called me her mom, but sometimes I'd catch her wince, like the word didn't sit right with her anymore. One evening, as I was chopping onions for dinner, she wandered into the kitchen, opened the fridge, then shut it without taking anything. Without turning to face me, she asked, "Do you ever wonder where I came from?" I froze, knife in hand, the onion half sliced on the cutting board. "Of course I do," I said softly. She didn't say another word, just walked away. Later, I wondered if that was her way of testing the waters or signaling something bigger. The distance between us wasn't just teenage growing pains anymore. It was about who she was, about the truth, about the life we'd built and the shaky ground it rested on. I started dreaming more about the past, her tiny hand in mine when I first held her, her giggles as a little girl, the soft "I love you" she'd murmur before drifting off to sleep. Those memories felt like whispers from a far-off place, growing fainter each day. I felt like I was standing on a bridge only I could see, calling out to someone who no longer wanted to hear me. I ached to reach her, but I didn't know how. It had been years since I'd touched the envelope, years since I'd let myself think about what was inside. But on that heavy afternoon, when the house felt eerily still and the tension with Dakota seemed to thicken the air, I found myself drawn to my bedroom dresser, to the bottom drawer where I'd stashed the envelope under old sweaters and faded photos. My fingers paused on the drawer's handle, as if they knew pulling it open meant unlocking a door I'd kept shut for years. Deep down, I understood I couldn't outrun the past anymore. It was already here, lingering in the quiet spaces between me and my daughter, growing louder with every question she hadn't yet found the words to ask. I slid the drawer open and gently lifted the small, worn manila envelope from its hiding place. It felt lighter than I remembered, almost fragile, as if time had worn it thin. The paper was soft, slightly yellowed, the ink on the front faded but still readable. My name was written in neat, hesitant cursive, with no return address, just a fragile link to the woman who had brought Dakota into the world. I sat on the edge of my bed, turning the envelope over in my hands before carefully opening it. Inside was the letter I'd read only once, 18 years ago, on the night I finalized Dakota's adoption, a night filled with gratitude so deep it overwhelmed me and a quiet fear that this piece of paper could one day undo everything. I unfolded the letter with care, as if it might fall apart if I moved too quickly. The handwriting was tight and small, the desperate scribble of a young girl. My heart raced as I started to read. It opened with an apology. "Dear whoever you are," it said. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I can't be what she needs. I'm sorry I can't give her the life she deserves. I love her so much it physically hurts. That's why I have to let her go." I remembered reading those words for the first time, sobbing until my body shook. I'd known then, with absolute certainty, that Dakota's mother hadn't walked away out of carelessness or selfishness. She'd made a choice to give Dakota a better shot at life, and I'd sworn to myself that I'd honor that trust. The letter continued, "Her name is Dakota. I chose it because it means strength, and she's going to need that. Please tell her I loved her first. Please tell her she was wanted. I didn't leave because I didn't care, I left because I wasn't enough." There were hints of fear, loneliness, and shame, but no details about her circumstances, no mention of the father, no word of family who might have stepped in but didn't. Just the raw pain of a girl too young to bear the weight of being a mother. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest. For a long moment, I sat there, eyes shut, feeling her heartbreak mingle with mine. So much love, so much loss. And Dakota, caught between two worlds she never chose. I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. The time was coming, faster than I was ready for, when Dakota would demand the truth I'd promised myself I'd share. I had to be prepared to show her everything, even the parts that hurt. I slid the letter back into the envelope but didn't tuck it away. Instead, I tucked the envelope into my nightstand's top drawer, where I could grab it easily when the time came. Hiding it away no longer felt right. That night, lying in the dark, unable to sleep, I thought about the vows we make when we love someone, promises to keep them safe, to shield them from hurt, to be their steady anchor. But sometimes, loving someone means sharing the hard truth, even if it risks breaking the comforting stories that once held them together. I couldn't predict how Dakota would react when she read that letter, whether it would bridge the gap between us or carve it deeper, maybe beyond mending. Still, I knew one thing for sure: she had a right to her full story, not just the pieces that were simple to share. The next morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection, the deeper lines around my eyes, the gray strands weaving through my hair, the exhaustion that clung to me like a shadow. I wasn't the same woman who'd first held Dakota all those years ago. Time had made me older, weighed me down with memories and mistakes, but it had also made me tougher. When the moment came to hand her that envelope, I'd be ready, because loving her meant standing strong through the chaos, even if it tore my heart apart. It was a Wednesday evening, one of those early spring days when the sky clung to winter's gloom and the air carried the sharp sting of cold rain. I'd cooked a comforting dinner, the kind Dakota used to love: roasted chicken, creamy garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with a hint of lemon. I wasn't sure she'd join me, but I made it anyway, more out of habit than expectation by then. She walked in just past 6:30, shutting the front door with a little too much force. Her boots left muddy streaks across the hallway, but I held my tongue. She tossed her bag onto the living room couch and lingered at the kitchen's edge, her gaze on the table unreadable, not quite disdain, not quite gratitude, just distant. I told her dinner was ready, keeping my tone soft and even. She didn't reply, just pulled out a chair and sat. We ate in silence, no TV, no music, just the clink of forks on plates, the faint hum of the fridge, and the uneven sound of our breathing. Halfway through, I asked about her classes, a familiar question I'd asked countless times, but something, maybe the gentleness in my voice or the effort to sound relaxed, set her off. Her fork hit the plate with a sharp clang, and she leaned back, arms crossed, eyes flashing with anger. "You don't have to act like everything's fine," she said, her voice low but burning. "Stop pretending we're some normal family." My hands gripped my napkin tightly, my heart racing. "I'm not pretending," I whispered. She let out a short, bitter laugh. "You think I'm clueless?" she said. "You think I haven't figured it out?" I couldn't respond, words wouldn't come. My pulse thundered in my ears. She shot up from her chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. Her hands clenched at her sides, her shoulders trembling, not with fear or sorrow, but with a deep, smoldering rage that had been simmering for years, hidden in quiet sighs and fleeting glances. "You've lied to me my entire life," she said. "I'm not your daughter. I never was." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stepped closer, shaking, her voice breaking at the edges. "I went through your drawer. I found the folder. I read the letter. There it was, the moment I'd dreaded for so long. It wasn't a question of if anymore, it had already happened. She'd read it alone, in secret, with no one to help her navigate the pain. "I trusted you," she said. "I told everyone you were my mom. I believed it, and you let me live that lie." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them spill. "You're not my mother," she said, louder now. "You're not even honest." Her words cut through me like shards of glass. My breath hitched, my vision blurred, but I didn't cry or plead or reach for her. Instead, I stood slowly and walked past her to the hallway, my legs heavy, my chest empty. I opened the side table drawer where I'd moved the envelope, preparing for this moment. I pulled it out and returned to the kitchen. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself like a shield. Silently, I held the envelope out to her. She stared at it, jaw tight, chin lifted in defiance, unmoving. "This is everything," I said softly. All I know, all I was given. She didn't take it at first, just glared at it like it might hurt her. Then, slowly, she reached out and grabbed it, her fingers trembling with urgency as she pulled it close to her chest and stepped back. "You should have told me years ago," she whispered. I nodded, unable to argue. I'd made that choice for her, telling myself it was for her sake, but maybe, deep down, it was for me, out of fear, love, or weakness. She turned and headed for the stairs, clutching the envelope like it was both a lifeline and a blade. I stood alone in the kitchen, the scent of garlic and lemon still hanging in the air, the plates half-eaten on the table, her chair still pushed back. The outburst had swept through like a sudden storm, loud, fierce, and now everything was quiet, broken, and heavy with aftermath. Some storms don't blow over quickly, they leave debris you have to sift through for a long time, and I didn't know if she'd come back to help me sort through it. The silence after her words settled over the house like a thick fog. I didn't try to break it, no texts, no knocks on her door, no calls when she left the next morning before I was even awake. I just let it linger, heavy but necessary. The envelope was gone from my drawer, she'd taken it upstairs, along with the truth I'd kept tucked away like a sacred secret for years. I pictured her in her room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the letter open in her lap, knees pulled close, her eyes tracing the words I'd read only once, long ago. I imagined her hands shaking like mine had, her heart tangled in anger, grief, and confusion. But I didn't imagine her forgiving me, not yet. The next few days, she stayed out later than usual, coming home late and leaving early. We moved past each other like strangers in our own house, a quick nod at the door, the creak of stairs overhead, no eye contact, no chit-chat, no shared dinners. I started noticing small signs she'd read the letter. Her bedroom door was left ajar one day. The loud, defiant music she always played went silent. She stopped wearing her headphones and moved through the house more quietly. Her face softened, the constant tension replaced by something wearier, emptier. On the 5th day, I came home from the grocery store and found her at the kitchen table. The envelope sat in front of her, carefully resealed, though I knew she'd opened it. She didn't look up as I stepped inside. Her hands rested in her lap, her hair loosely tied back, like she hadn't bothered to fix it. I set the grocery bags on the counter and waited. After a long pause, she spoke, asking if I'd ever met her birth mother. I told her no, that everything I knew was in that letter. She nodded slowly, as if she'd guessed as much. Then she asked if I'd ever planned to tell her. I said yes, I'd meant to, so many times. She didn't ask why I hadn't, she didn't need to. She already understood. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of all those years pressing down on me. I couldn't stop thinking about those early days, how Dakota would drift off in my arms, her tiny fingers curled around mine. I'd wake in the middle of the night just to make sure she was still breathing. Memories of school plays, birthday parties, bandaged knees, and her whispered secrets flooded back, along with all the times I almost told her the truth, each moment sharp in my mind, each one a chance I let slip by. Now she knew, and that knowledge had changed everything. The next morning, I found a note in her handwriting stuck to the fridge, saying she'd be gone for the weekend to visit a friend. It was short, just 2 lines, no details, no comforting words, but I didn't need them. She needed time to process, space to think, so I let her have it. I wandered through the quiet house, running my fingers over the picture frames, seeing the photos in a new light, not less meaningful, but heavier with significance. Every snapshot captured a moment when she didn't know the full story, yet her smiles were real, her joy undeniable. To me, our life was never a lie. She came home Sunday night, her steps softer, her posture less tense. She didn't slam the door or rush upstairs. Instead, she walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat across from me. Her words were few, she'd read the letter 4 times, cried, raged, felt both betrayed and thankful, and was still wrestling with how to hold all those emotions. I told her she didn't have to figure it out yet. She pushed the envelope across the table, saying she didn't want to keep it but didn't want it hidden either. Put it somewhere we can both get to it, she said, in case we need to read it again. I nodded, taking the envelope, and placed it in the kitchen drawer where we kept everyday things: keys, batteries, birthday candles, things that felt real, shared, and ordinary. Later that night, as I scrubbed dishes, I heard her playing the piano upstairs, the notes gentle and hesitant, not the bold melodies she once loved, but not shattered either. She was still here, still finding her way. The house never felt truly empty when Dakota was gone, but it changed in ways I'd grown to notice. The quiet sharpened, and the air seemed to hold its breath. Without her, even the walls echoed a little louder. I told myself this time apart was necessary, part of her healing, redefining who she was, coming to terms with her truth, but I still waited. She'd mentioned a friend but gave no name, no place, no timeline. I didn't push her. I just kept the lights on late, checked my phone too often, and cooked enough for two, just in case. The days dragged on. I tidied the house, reorganized the bookshelves in the living room, repotted the ficus by the hallway. I sorted through stacks of old mail. More than once, I found myself holding photos of her as a little girl, her third-grade portrait with that toothy grin, the petting zoo picture with her oversized sun hat, us in the kitchen covered in flour from Christmas cookies. I held them longer than usual, tracing her young face with my thumb, wondering what memories she still held dear, which ones still felt true to her. Each night, I sat in the same chair by the window, watching the street outside. The porch light hummed softly, a small signal I left on, for her, or maybe just for me. By the fourth night, I stopped expecting her to walk in. By the sixth, I stopped glancing at the clock, but I never stopped hoping. She came home on the seventh night, close to 11 p.m., when I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, a sound that felt like a melody I hadn't heard in ages. My heart raced as I sat up. The front door opened slowly, creaking. I didn't rush to meet her or say a word, I just waited. She stepped inside, hesitant, like someone unsure if the house still belonged to her. She looked different, not drastically, but enough, her shoulders softer, her eyes weary but clear, her hair tied back loosely, no longer dyed or styled with defiance. She set her bag at the base of the stairs and walked into the kitchen. I followed quietly, watching from the doorway. She paused, glancing around, as if deciding whether to speak. Without a word, I poured her a cup of tea and set it on the table. She sat, and we sipped in silence, not the silence of distance anymore, but the start of something calmer. After a while, she opened up. She'd gone to a friend's cabin near Flathead Lake, a quiet, out-of-the-way place. She'd spent her days walking the shore, scribbling in her journal, rereading the letter. She'd cried, stopped, then cried again, letting the days unfold slowly. She said something had changed inside her. She'd always thought the truth would shatter everything, that seeing it written out would break our life apart like glass under too much weight. But it didn't. Instead, the truth made things heavier but also more solid, more real. She looked at me then, and in her eyes, I saw not the little girl who called me mommy or the teenager who'd called me a liar, but a young woman, still hurt, still grieving, but searching for a way back to me. She asked if we could try again, not starting over, not pretending, but moving forward from here. I said yes, not with grand gestures or relief, but quietly, and that word filled the room like a warm light. In the days that followed, we took it slow. We ate breakfast together again, even if we didn't say much. She started lingering in the living room, curled up with a book on the couch, glancing at me now and then as I read or folded laundry. She helped carry groceries. She asked if I needed anything from town, small gestures, but they meant the world. One evening, I found her in the garage, holding the old photo albums we hadn't touched in years. She asked if we could look through them together. We spread out on the living room floor, flipping through pages, laughing at some memories, falling quiet at others. She pointed to a photo of herself at 6, wearing a paper crown on her birthday. I remember this, she said. I remember feeling loved. I reached for her hand and said, you were, every single day. She didn't pull away. I didn't try to fix everything with words. We both knew healing wouldn't come from apologies or long explanations. It would come from being there, from staying, from choosing each other over and over, even after the cracks. She didn't call me mom right away. Sometimes she used my name, sometimes nothing at all. But one morning, as she headed out to meet a friend, she paused at the door, turned back, and said it, just once, soft but sure. I stood frozen long after she left, letting that word ripple through me like a prayer finally answered. The change wasn't sudden or dramatic. It came gradually, like sunlight slipping through the blinds at dawn, tentative, quiet, but impossible to ignore. We started talking again, not just with words, but in the quiet rhythm of a life slowly knitting itself back together. One afternoon, as the trees outside glowed with the first hints of fall, I pulled down the box I'd kept hidden for years. This time, it wasn't about the letter, she'd already pored over those words. Instead, I carried down a weathered shoebox stuffed with small treasures and documents I'd tucked away over the years, never sure if they'd find a moment in our conversations, but saved just in case. Dakota sat at the dining room table, cradling a mug of tea, her highlighter gliding across a college course catalog. I placed the box beside her quietly and settled into the chair across from her. She eyed it for a moment, hesitated, then gently pried off the lid. Inside, she found faded ultrasound images marked with her birth name and date, the original adoption decree, medical records, a tiny hospital bracelet coiled like a sleeping infant, and a handful of photos, snapshots the social worker had handed me, the only traces of her first few months. One photo showed her birth mother, barely older than Dakota was now, sitting on a park bench, her gaze distant and heavy with unspoken pain. A creased napkin bore a blue ink doodle, her name, Dakota, 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 scrawled repeatedly. She lifted each item carefully, one by one, as if they might crumble under her touch. Her face stayed calm, but I could see her eyes linger, soaking in every detail, searching for stories and objects that couldn't speak for themselves. After a long pause, she looked up and asked if I'd ever tried to track down her birth mother. I shook my head, explaining it wasn't because I thought it didn't matter, but because I was scared of what I might find, or what I might not. I'd always worried the past could upend the life we'd built together, and I'd fought so hard to hold on to what we had, maybe too fiercely. She fell silent, clutching the photo of her birth mother, staring at it like she was trying to memorize the face. Then, unexpectedly, she reached across the table, her hand finding mine. "Tell me everything you know," she said, her voice soft but steady. So I did. I recounted the April day when the phone call came, asking if I was still open to fostering a child. I described how I scrubbed the guest room clean, how I cried the night they brought her to me, and again when her first smile lit up her tiny face. I admitted how terrified I was of not being enough, always bracing for someone to say I wasn't her real mom. She listened, her eyes locked on mine, her fingers still wrapped gently around my hand. I told her how I'd tiptoe into her room at night to check her breathing, how I learned the distinct sound of every cry she made, how I saved every scribbled drawing, every handprint craft, every lopsided valentine she made from red construction paper. I explained that I kept the letter not out of shame, but out of a deep respect, unsure how to share her origins without risking the truth of our bond. She didn't cry or press for more, she just held on, nodding, as if fragments inside her were starting to fit together, not erasing our story but weaving it into something larger. When I was done, she opened up about what it was like to read the letter, how it left her feeling like she was caught between two worlds yet anchored to neither. She admitted she hated that I'd hidden it, but she also saw why I did. She described the tangle of anger, fear, and a strange kind of freedom when she realized she could love me and still want to understand her roots without one canceling the other. Then she said something I'll carry forever: that letter didn't take a mom away from me. It showed me another piece of who I am. But you're the one who stayed, who raised me, and that's never going to change. That night, we lit candles on the back porch and sat under a sky full of stars, sipping tea. The air smelled of crisp leaves, and for the first time in months, we laughed, real, unguarded laughter that felt like a release. We swapped stories from her childhood, ones I hadn't revisited in years, and she leaned in, hungry for more, her smile flashing the same teeth that once bit into apples at school picnics, her hands the same ones that gripped mine when we crossed busy streets. It didn't mend everything, it wasn't meant to. But in that quiet space between us, something settled, a shared truth, rough-edged and heavy with memories, but whole. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were both home. The seasons shifted fast. One day, the trees outside were green, the next, they glowed with fiery oranges, golds, and deep reds. The mornings grew cold, and I started pulling out heavier blankets, piling them on our beds, lighting candles earlier to warm the house. The air carried scents of cinnamon, apples, and a tentative peace that was trying to take root. Dakota started lingering downstairs more. She'd spread her books across the kitchen table, asking for my thoughts on her college essays or reading bits aloud while I chopped vegetables for dinner. Her presence filled the house, not always talkative, but solid, like she was grounding herself again. Sometimes, she'd hum that old tune from her childhood, and I'd pause, holding my breath to catch every note. We weren't back to the way things were, we were building something new, more careful, more honest, a bond slowly reknit with shared effort. One Sunday, we wandered through the farmer's market together, nothing fancy, just pumpkins, steaming cider, and stalls selling knitted scarves and wooden trinkets. But she stayed by my side, not rushing ahead, pointing out little things, sharing her opinions, laughing at a vendor's corny joke. We stayed longer than we meant to, coming home with bags of random finds, lavender soap, a jar of fig jam, a small painted sign that said, "This kitchen runs on love and leftovers." That night, we made dinner together, me slicing vegetables while she stirred the soup, moving around the kitchen with an ease that felt like rediscovering a familiar dance. Our hands brushed at the counter, and I felt that quiet spark, the one that says, "We're still here, still us." Later, we sat on the couch, bowls of soup in our laps, a movie playing softly in the background. She rested her head lightly on my shoulder, and I didn't move, even when my arm went numb by the end of the film. That small weight held years of distance and devotion, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. One afternoon, we went through the shoebox again, this time together, page by page. She asked questions she hadn't before, and I answered without hesitation. We looked at the photos with less sorrow, more clarity. She traced her birth mother's smile with her fingertip and said, "Sometimes I see it in the mirror, but I see you there, too." That evening, she pulled her old scrapbook from the top shelf of her closet, dusty from years of neglect. We sat on the living room floor, turning pages filled with finger paintings, birthday cards, and crayon drawings of me with oversized glasses and wild hair. She pointed to one, a sketch of us holding hands in front of our house, hearts floating above, and said, "I was always yours. I just didn't know how to tell you." Some days were still hard. Sometimes, she'd close off or slip out of the room when emotions felt too heavy. But I gave her space, didn't push, just stayed where she could find me. And she always came back. Our story didn't end with a letter or a big revelation, it didn't end at all. It grew. We started new traditions, Sunday pancakes with too much syrup, morning walks through the neighborhood, quiet nights reading side by side, monthly drives to the lake she loved as a kid. We built new memories without trying to erase the old ones. The past wasn't a wound anymore, it was a map we were still following together. One quiet drive home from the grocery store, she turned down the radio and said, "I don't know what makes a mom real, biology, love, time. But if I had to pick who raised me all over again, I'd pick you every time." The rest of the drive was silent, the kind that wrapped around me like a soft blanket. We'd both changed, both hurt, but we'd both stayed. We weren't just mother and daughter by name or law anymore, we were us, scarred, complex, stitched together by truth and tenderness, and finally whole. Her expression stayed steady, but I could see her eyes linger on every detail, as if she were searching for stories and things that could no longer speak. After a long silence, she looked up and asked if I'd ever tried to find her birth mother. I told her no, not because I thought it wasn't important, but because I was scared of what I might uncover, or what I might not. I'd always worried the past could unravel the life we'd built, and I'd fought so hard to protect what we had, maybe too fiercely. She didn't say anything for a bit, just held the photo of her mother, staring quietly. Then she reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I shared how that April phone call came, asking if I was still open to fostering. I described cleaning out the guest room, how I sobbed the night they brought her to me, and again when she first smiled. I admitted how terrified I was of letting her down, always waiting for someone to say I wasn't enough, that I wasn't her real mom. She listened, eyes steady, her fingers still gently holding mine. I told her how I'd check on her every night as she slept, memorizing the rhythm of her breaths, learning her cries from across the house. I confessed I'd saved every school project, every handprint painting, every goofy Valentine she crafted from red construction paper. I explained that I kept the letter not out of shame but out of respect, unsure how to share her story without making ours feel less real. She didn't cry or ask for more, just held my hand and nodded, like pieces inside her were falling into place, not erasing anything but finding a new balance. When I finished sharing, Dakota spoke about what it was like to read the letter, how it left her feeling caught between two worlds, yet not fully part of either. She admitted she resented me for keeping it a secret, but she also saw why I'd done it, and she described the tangled mix of anger, fear, and a strange kind of liberation when she realized she could love me without turning away from her origins. Then she said something I'll hold close forever: that letter didn't take you away from me. It showed me another part of who I am. But you're the one who stayed, who raised me, and nothing changes that. That evening, we lit candles on the back porch and sat beneath a sky full of stars, cradling warm mugs of tea. The air carried the scent of crisp, fallen leaves, and for the first time in months, we laughed, full, free laughter that felt like a weight lifting. We traded memories from her childhood, stories I hadn't told in years, and she leaned closer, eager for more, her smile showing the same teeth that once bit into apples at school picnics, her hands the same ones that clung to mine when we crossed busy streets. It didn't wipe away all the pain, it wasn't meant to. But something found its place between us, a truth we shared, imperfect with its sharp edges and heavy memories, but whole. For the first time in a long while, it felt like we were both truly home. The seasons changed quicker than I'd expected. One day, the trees in our neighborhood glowed green, the next, they burned with fiery oranges, golds, and deep reds. The mornings grew colder, and I started pulling out thicker blankets, layering them over our beds, lighting candles earlier to warm the house. The air smelled of cinnamon, apples, and a tentative peace trying to take root again. Dakota spent more time downstairs now, bringing her books to the kitchen table, asking for feedback on her college essays or reading drafts aloud while I stirred dinner. Her presence filled the rooms, not always chatty, but solid, rooted. She started humming again, that old tune from her childhood, and I'd hold my breath to hear it. We weren't what we used to be, we were something new, more cautious, more honest, with a connection that felt rewoven, no longer frayed or tangled, just carefully rebuilt. One Sunday, we went to the farmer's market together, nothing special, just pumpkins, hot cider, booths with knitted scarves and wooden trinkets. But she walked beside me, not ahead, pointing out little things, sharing her thoughts, chuckling at a vendor's joke. We lingered longer than planned, coming home with bags of random treasures, lavender soap, fig jam, a hand-painted sign that read, "This kitchen runs on love and leftovers." That night, we cooked dinner together. I chopped vegetables while she stirred the soup, moving around each other with an ease that felt like rediscovering an old rhythm. Our hands brushed at the counter, and I felt that spark, the one that says, "We're still here, still us." Later, we sat on the couch, bowls of soup in our laps, a movie humming softly on the TV. She leaned her head lightly on my shoulder, and I didn't move, even when my arm went numb by the credits. That small weight carried years of distance and devotion, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world. One afternoon, we went through the box again, this time side by side, page by page. She asked new questions, and I answered without holding back. We looked at the photos with less pain, more clarity. She traced her birth mother's smile with her finger and said, "I see it in the mirror sometimes, but I see you, too." That evening, she pulled her old scrapbook from the top of her closet, untouched for years. We flipped through pages of finger paintings, birthday cards, and crayon drawings of me with oversized glasses and wild hair. She pointed to one, a sketch of us holding hands in front of our house, hearts floating in the sky, and said, I was always yours. I just didn't know how to say it. Some days were still tough. Sometimes she'd shut down or slip out of the room when feelings got too heavy. But I gave her space, didn't push, didn't chase, just stayed where she could see me. And she always came back. Our story didn't end with an envelope, a letter, or a big revelation. It didn't end at all. It grew. We started new traditions: Sunday pancakes, morning walks, quiet reading nights, monthly trips to the lake she loved as a kid. We made new memories without erasing the old ones. The past wasn't a scar anymore, it was a guide, and we were still navigating it together. One quiet drive home from the grocery store, she turned down the radio and said, I don't know how it all works, what makes a mom real. Biology, love, time. But if I had to pick who raised me all over again, I'd pick you. The rest of the drive was silent, the kind that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. We'd both changed, both hurt, but we'd both stayed. We weren't just a mother and daughter by name or law anymore. We were us, scarred, complex, woven together by truth and care, and finally whole.